Welcome back to Unlock Potential with David Archibald. I'm so glad you're here, and I truly appreciate you taking your time to tune in. Now, before we dive into today's episode, do me a quick favor and tap that subscribe button so you never miss these one-on-one conversations with leaders who are doing meaningful work helping others grow. Now, today's guest is someone who has spent decades quietly empowering other leaders, Victor Burrill. He's the chairman and chief connecting officer at the Business Executive Network here in Vietnam. He's a trusted coach to top-level CEOs and someone who has turned relationships building into an art form. Victor started as a chef in Michelin-star kitchens, but over the years, he's transformed into a leader of leaders, bringing people together, creating high-trust environments, and helping others unlock their full potential. Welcome, Victor, to the podcast. I'm very happy to see you and have you here today. Tell them how you got here to Vietnam.
Okay, well, I started here in 1968. I was born here during the Vietnam War. And then I was brought up in the UK. I came back here around 20 years ago. I visited the country that I was born in and loved it. It wasn't as developed as it is now, obviously. And I came here for what I thought might have been a couple of years, but actually I knew when I came here it'll be longer. And like I said, I've been here over 20 years now, and I have been involved with the personal development sector. I've been involved with education. I'm an executive coach, and now I spend a lot of time as chairman of the Business Executive Network, where we have a group of CEOs and general directors, country managers, and I absolutely love supporting them and helping them, just helping them connect and grow, and seeing them overcome the challenges they're facing, which, go through, which is what I basically focus on right now, the Business Executive Network in Vietnam. Yeah, so that's the short story. Obviously, at 57 years old, there's a lot of other little stories within there, but I won't go into too much detail unless you really want. But that's a short version.
Yeah, no doubt. I know you from the Business Executive Network. You really have blown me away with the value you create with the network. And the other CEOs and other business leaders that I'm around, I think, feel the same way. One of the things that surprises me is how you're able to really just stay at a high level, meeting after meeting after meeting, and you have lots of meetings, just not the ones I attend. There's many others that you're doing that.
Are you talking about the high level in terms of the quality of the meetings?
Oh, it's just everything. Yeah, you do a really good job. You have a very young team, but very attentive and good team that works around you. Now, all these different leaders that you've brought together, what's one of the things that you've noticed that they all do really well?
Okay, there's a few things I notice about successful leaders. I think one of the things I've been working with executive leaders for more than 10 years now, and it's probably fair to say that without being arrogant, I think I probably know them better than most because I'm so exposed to them and I see so many. One of the things I think that makes a high quality leader is often they don't need to tell anybody just how good they are. They don't need to. Their performance speaks for themselves. They tend to be quite reticent in terms of boasting. And I've met people that actually like to talk about the good things in a way that actually elevates them. And what I realize is that good leaders, one of the characteristics is they don't need to over talk themselves or be insecure about what they're achieving, etc. Their numbers speak for themselves. Most of them are very, very focused. They know what they need to do, and they don't have massive highs and lows. They have good days and bad days, of course, but they don't over rejoice on the good days and they don't overly get upset on the bad days. They're able to ride the wave, so to speak, in a really, the emotions don't take over. Can you imagine that, 18 or 19 years old, you get on that football team and there's a rejoice. Get into the, you eventually get into university and and that's all great. And then you have a disappointing letter that you don't get the first job that you apply for. They have all of those, but they're able to respond in a very controlled way. The ups and downs tend to be less. They're able to handle bad days really well and realize that tomorrow's another day. So there's a couple of characteristics. Like I said, they're very focused. They know what they need to say no to and what they need to say yes to.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And there's a saying that I wrote here. I listen to a lot of content, by the way. And Seth Godin said in his book, The Dip, quite contrary to the term that lots of people hear, winners never quit. He says that winners quit all the time. They just quit at the right things quit the right things at the right time. Yeah. And I think that I think good, successful leaders know when they need to, what they need to say no to.
Yeah.
And that's really tough sometimes. And they know when to say no to an opportunity, when it's no to an appointment perhaps, or an invitation. And what I'd say to even young leaders is that you've got to know, winners quit. And they say no to many things in order to focus on the important things. And there's a cost there too. I remember hearing an interview with a very, very senior military leader. And he said that he missed some of the important things with his children. He might have been in Afghanistan, he might have been in the theater somewhere, and he's missed his daughter, first breakup with her boyfriend and things like that, or the son having the bully at school and things like that. And I'm not saying that it's good not to spend time with your kids, but sometimes if you want to be ultra successful, you sacrifice. And so there's some of the things I've noticed. They have a lot of responsibility. They have good pay that goes with it, but there's a massive cost to success. Yeah. So there's some of the things I've noticed with them, and they grin and bear it. They get on. They're not complainers, and sometimes they get fatigued and they don't even realize it. And and sometimes you pick it up and you say, "Hey, are you okay?" And and that they're okay. They're not complainers, but these are some of the things I've noticed about high performing leaders. Yeah, I think you've seen it too, Dave. You've been in meetings where you see, I can hear in the voice this guy. We had a meeting just a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? We had somebody that was talking about exiting his business, and I could tell in his voice he was done. He was ready to chuck it all in. If somebody offered him something decent for his business, he'd take it, and he was. But I know that he spent enormous amounts of time on planes, traveling across the region, missing the loved ones around him, and so these are some of the things, but. That's some of the characteristics. You're making it to be ultra successful requires incredible focus, incredible sacrifice, and it's not for everybody.
That's right.
It's not for everybody. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Now, when you started the Business Executive Network, what was this problem you were trying to solve? What did you see?
That's interesting. Well, first of all, when I started off, I wasn't sure completely what I was doing. Okay. I had a lot of people that I was coaching or helping out, and I realized I had all similar problems. So I decided that I'd get them together, and they came together. I got some inspiration by an organization called EGN, Executive Global Network, which I did some work with for a short time. And I got CEOs and general directors together. And I realized that they, first of all have issues. They when I say issues, we all have issues. We all have blind spots. When you run a business, you're trying to get your business somewhere. It's like a boat. You're the captain of a boat and you have a destination. It might be to build performance or build profitability or make your ship perform better or whatever it is. And they had enormous expertise. Most of our members have more than 20, 25, 30 years experience. You get 6 or 7 of those in a room, and there's some great ideas that come up. And so I got them together, and we would have a theme or a question, or we'd discuss a topic, and I let them help each other out. And it's incredible. Sometimes you might only have 4 or 5 or 6 CEOs in a room, and you might have 20 minutes each. On average, that is. Some people may not need very long, and some people might have an issue that might need a bit more time. And it's amazing the investment of time that they give and get back. And we try and keep our meetings short, 2.5 hours, and there's a lot of value there. So and they keep coming back.
Oh yeah,
they keep coming back. And the more
I'm a believer, it works good. It works good.
Well, it does. And sometimes people get more out of it than others. But what I'd say is that interesting enough, last year, for example, I had 1 or 2 members that might only come to 1 or 2 meetings in the entire year. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the renewal, I go, "You sure you want a renewal?" I didn't quite say it like that. And they say, "Victor, I don't join the network for the number of meetings I attend. I join for the value that I get when I do attend." And they renew. And that 1 or 2 meetings might cost them, quite a lot of money for a meeting, but they get so much value from it. They're able to go back into their businesses and add value to their companies. So there you go. So I'm continually learning how to serve them better.
Yeah.
And I ask a lot of advice. What do you think about my humor here? Do you think that this is appropriate? Is the timing right for the meeting? And I don't over ask. I'm not insecure, but I'm just trying to get my finger on the pulse to make sure I get it right. In most cases, I do. Occasionally, I've not quite got it right or whatever, but overall, we're aiming for 9 out of 10 experience for most of our meetings. We sometimes fall a bit short. Sometimes we might exceed it, but that's where we're aiming, and we put enormous effort into every single event that we do, so that we try and get it right.
That's right. Yeah. Now, Victor, you mentioned blind spots, and I think that as leaders, everyone has them, and sometimes they can be pretty bad, and people don't realize it. What's some of the blind spots that you've seen that you've helped maybe coach people through?
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I had a situation about 5 or 6 years ago where we had somebody that came along, and I didn't notice this to start off with, but I realized that people did not like being in a group with this person. And then it became more apparent when I was asked to send a list of attendees for the peer group. As you know, we have groups of around 12 or 14 people, sometimes more. And they asked who was coming, and then they said, I won't come to this one. And I was a bit curious. And I said, why? And it was because this person was coming. I said, what's wrong with this person? And it was because he came along not to be vulnerable or to get input, but to boast about how incredible things are. And I didn't realize it. So we might have a question. Let's make this question up. It might be, what needs to change for your organization to excel, for example? And he'll be talking about, he'll switch it around to talk about how wonderful things are in his leadership. And people got a bit fed up with it. And it never stood out to me. And he was a person I often went to for advice. And you're one person I go to advice quite a lot, David. I ring you up and go, what do you think? And about many things. And because I trust your judgment and you know me quite well. And he was one of those people. And I would go to him, and I thought I could give him the benefit of my advice was, you should maybe be a bit more vulnerable and talk about weakness. And I'd encourage you to do so. And he said, is this something you've seen or other people? I said, well, it's been mentioned to me, but I've seen it myself. And he was so arrogant that he had decided that he would never come to a meeting again.
Wow.
He unfriended me on Facebook. He unfriended my partner on Facebook. LinkedIn blocked. And I haven't seen him for 6 years. I saw him actually at an event, a drinks, and I didn't realize just how arrogant he was. And in fact, I don't think he's been a CEO. He around that sort of time stopped being a CEO. He's not been a CEO since.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an example of somebody having a weakness and having a blind spot, and I think arrogance, where you don't see things and when people can't give you feedback. So that's an extreme case. I didn't have many of those. I had a couple of people, but I actually try to avoid those people becoming members. If I have somebody that wants to sell or to speak and not learn, then I generally discourage them to be members. So we actually are quite selective, not overly selective. We don't want to be, but we I think arrogance is one of the biggest weaknesses. And I think when not admitting you have a blind spot.
Yeah.
That's and so I think that, so I'm sharing with you an example. I think some CEOs, anybody, not just CEOs, if you don't see your blind spots, you won't grow. And quite frankly, I am not surprised not a CEO. In fact, I wouldn't recommend he'll ever be a CEO. In fact, I'm quite disgusted by his behavior, to be honest with you, because I considered him a friend. At least he can come to me and say to me, I think you're out of order, man. Let's have an argument about it. I'm trying not to swear on your podcast, but I'd rather have that. I'd rather have it out than somebody close the door on me like that and walk away. It's a bit immature,
Yeah, for sure.
So I think arrogance it is, and just being aware, being open to suggestions and ideas. I think it's just humility. And in fact, the whole principle of the network is realizing that you don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. We don't all have the answers. We've got experience and we've got a pretty good idea. But having the benefit of somebody giving you a suggestion, you might go, I never thought about that. That's valuable, isn't it? That's the essence, isn't it?
And the funny thing is the people that they're leading, they all know the blind spot, but they just don't see it.
Do you mean that they know their own blind spots?
The people that are being led by the leader, they know what the leader's blind spots are, but the leader doesn't know.
That's right. And they talk about the boss's blind spots all the time at the water cooler, and the kids know the blind spots too, don't they?
Right.
So and we're not fooling ourselves by pretending we don't have them.
That's right.
So
that's right. Now, when we talk about blind spots with leaders, what's some ways that we can involve the personal growth to be better at what we're not good at?
Are you talking about the leader's personal growth? Yeah. I think, CEOs, general directors, country managers have got to their position because they are pretty damn good at least 1, 2, or 3 things, at least that. And so they may be good at sales, they may be good at market penetration, they may be good at distribution or whatever it is. And so they're pretty damn good. But Marshall Goldsmith wrote a book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I think he listed 20 behaviors that are preventing CEOs or leaders getting to the next level. And so it is absolutely inevitable that there's something that they need to change or develop to get them to the next level. And the quicker they identify that, the quicker they can change it, and the quicker they can get, take things to the new. And it doesn't matter how big the organization is. Marshall Goldsmith coaches the most senior CEOs in the world. I mean, he's coaching the Fortune 500 CEOs. We're not talking about the country manager of Vietnam or Singapore. He's talking about people that have 20, 30, 40,000 employees worldwide, and sometimes more. So I think when you sail a ship, the metaphor, the ship for a company, you want to have a close knit of advisors that you can go to help you navigate it so your ship doesn't crash. And I think you'd be pretty foolish not to have those advisors. Some of those advisors will be helping you with the weather, which would be the economic outlook. Some of those will be helping you to make the ship shipworthy, helping you make sure your team are ship shape, if that makes sense, is making sure that are you on the right track? You need to bring it in. I'm using the metaphor here, but I think it's and most successful leaders have got advisors. I think you'd be done not to, wouldn't you? I think you got to have people around you that are giving you advice, and so this is where the network, I think, adds quite a lot of value to people, because they can come along and they can go, And sometimes what happens is somebody is expressing an issue they're having in their business, and they're giving advice to that person. They're going, God, maybe I need to improve it here too. You know,
That's right.
That often happens, doesn't it? Is go, you know, what you're struggling with right now, I could improve it a little bit by applying some of these things I'm hearing right now. So you know, it's a business is like a machine, and you want to try and make it work as best as you can, and you're tinkering with it all the time, and you're changing parts, and you're producing a product or a service, and so you're a mechanic, if you like. As a CEO, you're trying to make this machine trying to make it produce. You understand the analogy?
Yes,
I think so. I sometimes use the analogy that a business is like a machine. It produces a product or a service, and you're the person that helps it work really well. And sometimes you're happy with the performance. It may not be perfect. You know, this machine is okay. It's working quite well. I'm not going to muck around with it. You know, but then occasionally you go, this part's got to change. But you got to remember, these parts are people often, and then you got to be careful how you change them, because you know, people are not parts. They're emotional. They've been with the organization for a long time, and they need to be handled in a very careful way. So there you go. That's the value. Just talking about blind spots and getting advice and being open to being getting straight feedback.
Being able to ask for feedback, reflect on feedback, and then action feedback is a skill. I mean, you have to go through that process a few times before you start to understand it, and then you can really grow if you do that.
Yeah. And I think one thing I've realized with people that have been in leadership for 20, 30 years or so, which you and I have, is you probably have overcome many challenges that you can deal with much quicker this time round.
Yeah.
But occasionally we face a challenge we haven't faced forever, or it's a unique one. I faced one with dealing with millennials, you know, and maybe not handling it in the best way, or realizing that there was a response I didn't expect, and things like that. And so it's going to be in fact, I spoke to you a couple of times about this, and you gave me a very interesting perspective. And so there you go. It's getting feedback. It's having people that you can go to for advice in order so you can navigate your business in the right direction. So
what does leadership look like when nobody's watching?
Well, leadership to me is helping a group of people work together to achieve a goal. And when no one's watching, it's, I guess, being able to step away and let the machine purr by itself. You can leave the boat and it will continue and operate without you. If you're a general manager of a hotel, it means you can walk out of the hotel and it works really well. I'm not sure what it looks like when no one's watching, but one of the phrases that comes to mind is, it's when they feel that they've done it, they've achieved it, they've delivered, and you don't get the credit. I think that's what I would say is leadership. It's really supporting the team to achieve that. I guess it's a bit like being the conductor of an orchestra, where the orchestra are producing the music and you are not contributing to the sound, but you're supporting them and listening out for those that perhaps need a bit of help or can't hear very well. It's really making sure that it produces music or produces. So I think it's just standing in the background and supporting the team. I don't know whether I don't know what you meant by the question, but to me, leadership is allowing the team to produce the magic. And great leaders actually don't always contribute to the performance. Here's an example. When SEAL Team 6 went into Pakistan to extract Osama bin Laden, the leaders weren't there on the ground. It was done by the participants, experienced participants. When Real Madrid play football and win the Champions League, the manager is on the sideline. The orchestra is the example. He doesn't produce the music. He is orchestrating the other people. Leaders do not add to the performance. They support the performance. So in high performing teams, the leader is the one that is enabling the performance, and they are stepping back. So
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. Now you are orchestrating these peer group meetings, and the room's full of egos. How do you navigate that? How do you make sure that the egos don't take over?
That's interesting, David. I don't see a room full of egos. I see a room full of CEOs that are accomplished, that I see people, I see very down-to-earth people. That's what I see. I don't see egos. I don't see that. I feel like I'm a little sensitive towards, to me, ego is another word for arrogance. I don't see much of that. And perhaps they leave their ego at the door and come in and they have a discussion, I guess. They're all worthy of respect, and they get that, and we credit their experience or their perspectives. But I don't ever feel like I need to manage an ego. Well, occasionally I do. Occasionally I have someone that wants to share a little bit more than they should, but it's not. It's the exception, not the rule. Sometimes I know that someone's coming in and they like to share a lot, and I have to carefully encourage them to allow other people to contribute.
You might have done that to me a couple times.
No, not you, never you. I did consider once having cards like a green card for speaking a little bit more because they're a little bit quiet, and a red card for speaking a little bit less. I actually got them cut once, but I never used them. I thought it might be a little bit condescending, and I thought it was CEOs, but there was a couple of times when I thought, you know what, if you speak again, I'm going to actually cut you off. And in fact, I'll tell you something that happened 2 or 3 months ago. I did have somebody in the room that did speak a lot, and I did cut in a couple of times, and he was completely offended and walked out.
Wow.
Yeah, he did, and he sent me a message afterwards and said he wouldn't come again. And we had breakfast or lunch just recently, and I think we're going to be okay. I'm not sure I'd want him to become back as a member. He may not be ready for that. He may not want to, but and it's true, I did cut him off a couple of times, but he did have a reputation of just speaking a lot. And, so I don't always get it right.
Well, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of people that rarely hear no. They're the boss. They get to do what they want to do all the time, and then they come in that environment, and sometimes you have to say, no, we're going to do this and that. So I guess ego is maybe a rough word, but being able to deal with the different personalities of CEOs. Yeah.
Well, I think that I'm not sure what you observe when you say egos, David, but I think that you'd be pretty hard to impress anybody around that room, right? I do not add my contribution. The group that you're in, for example, they're very experienced CEOs. Some of them have 2, 3, 4, in one case 7,000 employees. Got a new member with 6,000 employees. These people are running very large organizations, and when the advice flies around the room, I'm very reticent to add any advice because I realize that there's smart people around the room. I might, if I feel it was useful, share something that I might have heard from another meeting that might add some value.
Yeah.
But my contribution is less than 3%.
Sure.
I'm just facilitating the conversation and stuff. Yeah. If I was working with another group of SMEs where they're perhaps less experienced, maybe 5 or 6 years management experience or 10 years, I might give more input and value. But I feel that's my job to do that as well. Yeah. So it just depends on the situation. Yeah.
Now, dealing with CEOs, especially in Vietnam here as we are, what's something that you've seen that a brand new country manager, general director, CEO to Vietnam should be really learning? They need to get some knowledge.
Well, it's interesting. I interviewed one CEO of a very large organization, it was online. I was face to face with him, and we had a room with lights and 2 cameras, and we had people joining us online from Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, Da Nang. And I asked him a question. He has, his company was turning over nearly $1 billion. It's over $1 billion a year now. Very, very well-known Fortune 500 company. And I asked him this question: what advice would you give a new CEO coming into Vietnam? And he said, very wisely, just spend 2 or 3 months just going around getting to know how it all works. Don't change anything. Well, of course, if there's something critical that absolutely needs to be changed, going back to the machine, you need to change the part because it's really not working properly, then do that. But just really understand. And he was taking over a reasonably successful business. Of course, if the machine was tinkering away quite well, he probably wanted to get it to perform a little bit better, of course. But he suggested 2 or 3 months just going around, understanding your business, understanding your customers. And he had been in this role for at least a year, I think, at that time. And I asked him about, this is off the meeting, if you like. This was the small talk beforehand. And he feels he's the luckiest man in the world because he's got such an amazing team. And it's those people that say that have the highest performing teams. Whenever I've seen a high performing manager, when I say a high performing manager, not that they're performing high, but their machine is performing high, they often talk about how lucky they are that their main people are amazing, and they give them all the credit. And I don't think they do it to impress me. They really wholeheartedly mean it. These people make it happen. It's from the heart. And so the advice he gave was just try to understand your business. Sometimes we go in and we try and change things too quickly. And I, on that note, by the way, I coached somebody. He was from Europe. He was a CEO of a production facility. And I was asked to go in and do training for his managers. And I had a meeting with him, which is called a training needs analysis beforehand. And he was telling me all that was wrong with his managers. And I did the training, and I realized that all these managers absolutely didn't like the CEO at all. And he asked me if I could coach him, and I was happy to do so. And I realized his disdain, his disgust, his displeasure with these people was oozing out of him. Mm-hmm. And eventually, they had to pull him out of Vietnam. He would publicly rebuke them. He would make a lot of mistakes, and there was just a culture issue, a behavior issue. And I realized that he was the one that needed the help, not the training for the managers. He was recalled to his home country, and in fact, he left the organization completely, and then he got a job with another company. So I've seen. So my thoughts are that there's a number of factors, but one of them is ask lots of questions, just find out what's going on, and there's a saying that was that assume good intention from people. Yeah. Sometimes you can misjudge it and assume bad intention. So there are a few things that
from my experience when I got here, what really sticks out in my mind is don't tear down the fences until you know why they were put up in the first place, right?
It's a great one.
Because I came in wanting to tear down all these fences, and then I realized, we need to. Okay. So I think that's a good one.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're looking at military terms, I use a lot of analogies. You want to do your reconnaissance, or you want to understand. Mm-hmm. Understand. Yeah. Measure 3 times, cut once, as they say. And haven't we sometimes made the mistake of thinking this person is hopeless, and we say, look, you're finished now, and then realize you got a massive hole there. This guy did more than we thought. That's right. Oh, yeah.
Victor, the people that you individually coached, and the CEOs that you're helping now, what's something that surprised you that they struggle with?
There was one thing I realized, that we have had people join us as members and they work for a big company, well-known company. lots of people. And when I say lots of people, the headcount in their organization pretty high. And we bring them in, and I have made the mistake of putting them on a pedestal and thinking they'll give lots of advice, and realizing that they're hurting and they need as much help as possible. And it was only when they leave the organization or leave the country that I realized that they joined us for a reason. And that's happened a few times. And I'm talking about big companies, you know. And so I think that I now, when people come as a member, there's a reason why they're a member. And one of the reasons is they want to be able to put their fish on the table, and put their issues on the table, because they're struggling. In one case, I knew somebody that came into Vietnam, became a member, and it was the first time he was a CEO. He was a national sales manager for the entire country where he was before. He became the CEO here. And he was new to Vietnam, and he was new as a CEO. Of course, he was an experienced executive. And he didn't make it to many meetings, but I didn't realize this. I held him on a pedestal, but I realized that he was panting for input, anything that could help him perform better. You know this person, I won't mention his name. You may not be knowing who I'm talking about right now, but I realized that we all need help. And in fact, I'm thinking about putting in one of our emails, if you have a specific issue that you'd like help with, let me know. And we can try and help it. And I think and sometimes we can die in silence. And I'm not saying he was dying. I'm not saying he was struggling. I'm not saying he was doing a terrible job, but I think he was just, I overlooked the fact that he probably would like to put himself on the hot seat a couple of times and get the benefit a little bit more, and perhaps we could have helped him a little bit more.
Oh, I'm similar to that. I mean, you approached me to join the network, and when times were really good, I wasn't interested, and when times got bad, I thought, whoa, I got to step my game up. I got to become a better leader. How do I do that? Where can I go? And then I finally fell through with what you offered me. And then after that, I really realized how much value there really is with that. And I know that for me, at least, a lot of times you can't talk about your problems with your team, and you either have your spouse or your team. And then when you're able to join like the Business Executive Network, there's other people you can bounce things off of. And that's definitely makes a lot of difference. Victor, what do you think is the loneliest part of leadership?
Gosh. Well, I've heard this saying, it's tough at the top, worse at the bottom. I think there is a loneliness, that's sort of tongue in cheek. There's a loneliness, an executive loneliness that happens. I think that CEOs give and give and give, and they have to. They have to give to their customers, they have to give to their staff, their management team, they
shareholders.
Shareholders, bosses, peers, regional peers in their organization if they're an international company. And could you repeat the question again, sorry?
What do you think is the loneliest part of being a CEO?
I think that, well, I think it's a bit like being the captain of the ship. The ship comes into the port, everyone gets off, they're celebrating, they're with their families, or they're on a break or whatever it is. And it's probably the feeling of sitting on that bridge and going, the next chapter of this journey has come to an end. We're going to take a break now and we'll do the next one. And I think it's a place that they're used to, particularly those that have been doing it for a long time. And I think that they're on that bridge alone, captain of the ship, sitting in their office like maybe you or other people, and thinking, or just looking out, seeing their staff go home at the end of the day, and they're left with, they're the captain, and they're ultimately responsible for the outcome of that organization. So I think that's something they feel comfortable with, but I think that loneliness is a feeling that they probably get so used to
That's
it's
not been able to bounce things off your own staff because maybe it's too sensitive, or your insecurities as a leader. And I think that's partly what makes your network so valuable, is you do have the ability to go in and be humble to somebody and say, hey, what's your take on this? Why do you think I should do it this way versus that way? That you can't have that conversation with anyone on your team because maybe you feel, oh, this guy is, doesn't know what he's doing, right? So I think that is something that the network does really well.
Yes. Do you remember when we had Tan Vu, the ultra marathon runner?
Yes.
One of you were speaking.
Yes, I was speaking.
You were speaking at that same session. And one of the things that she said that struck me is one of the biggest challenges she has for doing the huge distances she runs. She does cycling, running, and swimming, doesn't she? And she does incredible distances. Yes. One of the things that she says the most challenging is not the training, etc., etc. It is the boredom, the repetitiveness. And I think that what stood out to me in that talk was that when she had to swim, whatever it was, 300, 500 kilometers, it wasn't through beautiful streams and nice, it was around
That's right.
fucking lake.
That's right.
It's like,
exactly right.
And she said, that's the challenge.
Yes.
I can swim it, no problem at all. It's just the boredom of it.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us went away and go, you know what?
Yeah.
We have to keep doing the same things that we know we need to do in order to keep the machine running.
That's right.
And I think that's and in fact, one of the things I wrote down here was Robert Greene. I listened to a lot of content. Said that a lot of people think they should just follow their passion, but Robert Greene said that actually successful people are used to doing repetitive things, almost boring things, in order so that they become really good at it.
Yes.
So if you can imagine a concert pianist having to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, or I think about David Beckham, who is the former England striker, midfield player that was famous for his free kicks. I saw an interview once. People just watched him through the window and saw him on the football pitch by himself, with balls, kicking them into the goals, rain or shine. No one's and that's why he was able to do that so well.
That's right.
And I think success requires you to knuckle down and motivate yourself to be amazing. And not everyone's willing to do that. And I think that it's the repetitiveness.
That's right.
And so, and I know people that have a passion for something and then they lose that passion, they do something else, and they'll never truly be successful.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Do your passions and stuff, but if you want to be successful, you've got to be able to really train and be an expert so that people will give you top dollar for it. Yeah.
Discipline is falling in love with what you hate to do. You got to fall in love with it. Be repetitive and disciplined. On that note, what's one mindset or a skill that you think young leaders should work on?
Okay. Well, I mentioned winners never quit. Well, winners quit all the time. And so I think that I think the first thing actually before that is just have an idea where you want to go. I'm not saying that you have to be so specific. If you're 25 years old or 30 years old or 18 years old, or that's young to me. You're a young man or young woman. Have an idea of where you'd like to be. At least have a vision. Maybe it could be a North Star, and that can change. Have an idea of what you'd like to do in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And try and get experience or competencies or training or qualifications in that, so you're building up skill and expertise in that direction. There's nothing wrong in changing that and changing your career, but if you do that too many times, you'll end up being a little bit spread when it comes to your expertise. And so that's one of the things. So have an idea where you want to go. The more focused you are on that, the more likely you're going to get there. Depending on how much you want to be successful will depend on how much you want to quit other things in order to achieve that goal. And I think most people can achieve their goal. They just need to work out what they need to give up to do it. And I can promise you, you can achieve almost anything if you put the resources and time into it. I mean, I say almost anything. I mean, not everyone's going to be an astronaut. Not everyone's going to be the president of your country. But I think that if you have a goal that you want to have a career in a certain area, and you put enough resources in, and 20, 30 years, you're going to be pretty damn good at it.
Yeah.
Okay, without a doubt. And no one's going to train you and get you there. You're going to have to get there yourself. That's right. So and be ready for the repetitive boredom. You know, be an expert. And let me say, if you are the best in what you do, no matter how niche it is, you'll get work. People will want to hire you, providing, of course, it's hireable. You know, of course it is. Yeah. So those are a few things that I would say, and be a little careful. A lot of advice goes around for young millennials or Gen Zs that you should do 2 or 3 years in a company, then move on. The question I have for you is, you've got to be valuable. And when you are that person that moves on, does your boss go, oh my gosh, I've lost this person, they are so valuable to this organization? Or do they shake your hand and wish you the best and not care either way? And if it's the latter, then you will continue taking from companies, but it's really the ability to add enormous value. And I think, and so there's a few thoughts there that I have. I don't know whether you agree. You've hired people before, and I'm sure you've had a lot of people come and go over the years, and some that you're almost glad you don't want to tell them that. Oh, what a shame. Well, good luck with your career. And you close the door, you sit down and you go, thank God they're out the door. And there's some people that you go, oh my gosh.
Yeah. This is a hole.
This is a hole. This is going to hurt us. How are we going to replace this person? And you know that person's going to be successful. You know they're going to go on to do great things, and you have to allow them to do great things. And I think that so ask yourself that question. Whoever's listening to this podcast, I would say just think about who you really are. Be very, very, and ask. And so I think you and I, when we look to develop people in our organizations, we're looking for those nuggets of people that we can raise up. And
especially we're looking for people that are willing to take on more responsibility. Because when you're willing to take on some more responsibility and you're happy about that and your attitude's about that, then I'm looking, hey, this is a person I know I can move up. This is a person I know I can put in maybe temporarily put them in a management spot, even though they're not the manager, and then they take the responsibility without the pay, and then this person's going to be good, and then you switch them permanently. I think that's how they look at it. It's important.
I interviewed somebody just last week, and I had a Zoom call with this person initially, and I was pretty impressed. And I invited them to come in and see me. And by the way, at the end of that call, I asked this person to add me on WhatsApp. I typed my number in the chat on Zoom and asked her to add me on WhatsApp. And the reason I asked her to do that, so that I could make an appointment for her to come in 2 or 3 days to see me personally. And she didn't do that. And I thought maybe she misunderstood me. Maybe she added me on WhatsApp but didn't send me a message. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. And she came into my office, and she came for the second interview. And I had somebody with me in this interview because I was about to hire this girl. That was how much she impressed me. And then she gave me the reason she didn't. We discussed about the WhatsApp message. And she said that, I heard the request, but I wasn't quite ready to add you on WhatsApp because I was worried that you might ask me questions I wasn't prepared to, address, or it was something along those lines. And I go, well, the reason I wanted to add you was I wanted to be able to connect with you and deal with you directly as opposed to my team, so that I could arrange a meeting with you. But instead I had to go to somebody else that contacted you to come me back and all this sort of stuff. And I said, would you add me today? She said she would. And then as she left, the person that was in the interview with me, she said, I don't feel comfortable adding Victor on the WhatsApp, and she didn't. And the day after, I sent an email to her refusing her application. I was about to hire her. And I think that we, as executives, as senior managers, when we see people, we have a feeling about whether this person's going to add value to our organization, or whether they're going to have a better idea. Now, I'm okay if she said to me, I'd rather not. Can we deal with email? but she said she would and she did not. And to me, it was,
Yeah.
And I had a chat with the girl that was in the interview with me, young, enthusiastic manager, and she said it was weird. I feel very uncomfortable. and I got a second opinion on it, and I slept on it the next day. I decided to draft the email and send it to her. But I think that you and I, we get a feeling, and we don't always get it right.
That's right.
But we generally get a feeling about who's going to make it, who's going to be outstanding, and who's not.
Oh yeah, after we've been in it so long, for sure. You start to see it. That's right. And you obviously, interviews people rehearse a lot of those. The real person doesn't always show up in the interview. Then you hire them and you see the real person later.
And occasionally we need to fill a place, and we got somebody that isn't maybe a high performing person, but you want to get them to come in. It might be a job that we might give a 1-year contract or 6-month contract to, and we need to fill it. But we're always looking for those those people that can rise to our organization, that we can really. Right. I mean, isn't it true that you and I can give them so much responsibility, it could almost overwhelm them?
That's right.
And we want to do that. We want to do that. And there's people there that we can't do that to, because they will, and so there's if you want to succeed, there's people that want to develop you. I feel that, and I can introduce you. Anyway, we understand that. I think you and I understand that very well. Yeah. I think people think that we're holding people back, and good leaders are trying to raise quality and develop people, because we need them. We need to raise managers, right?
That's right. You get a lot of, what's the career path here, and what am I going to get out of this? And you're like, okay, versus, hey, what problems do you have, and how can I help you solve those problems? It's so. I think the expectations of what people are looking for in a job are reversed. You need to look on what value you can bring to that company, not what the company's going to give you. And the people that want to bring value, want to solve problems, are the ones that move up. They're just plain and simple. All right, Victor, switch things up here. 20 years from now, your grandkids are going to watch this, and they're going to see their grandpa on here. Or maybe it's even your great-grandkids in 40 years. What's one thing that you would like to tell them? That what's your dream for them, or how can they unlock their potential?
Wow. Well, the world they'll be living in would be a lot different to the one we grew up in, wouldn't it?
That's for
sure. Even in our, I think you're a little bit younger than me, and already in the 57 years I've been alive, it's changed a lot. Well, I think agility is one of the things that they'll need to have. They need to be super flexible. They'll need to be super willing to change direction quickly, because I think technology will dominate their lives, and particularly AI, and So they, just like the machines took over the physical work, AI will take over the mental time that it takes to do things. And so there'll be, so I can't imagine what it might be like then. I know that I'll be, my principles, what was the question? Sorry, what would be my...
What do you want to tell your grandkids?
Yeah, okay.
What would you like them to know about you?
Oh, about me?
About you, or about how they can unlock their own potential?
Well, I think about unlocking your own potential, and this might be advice for any young person. When I say young, anybody less than 40 is young to me, but less than 30, is stretch yourself. I think that get out of your comfort zone, stretch yourself. I think learning and growth happens when you decide to do something that really does push you. I don't mean to overwhelm you to the point that you collapse and cry, and but I'm talking about stretching yourself. Get yourself out of the comfort zone. Get off your butt. I'm not saying that, but it's just, I've been told by my own son, actually, that I need to be a little bit more compassionate about people, and it's true. I am the get shit done person, though. I focus on getting the job done, And I have offended a few people on the way to that when they've not been on board. But I'd say stretch yourself and be good at something. Be known for something that you're excellent at. I don't mean world famous, but just be good at something that has a value to your family, to the people that you work with. So that are probably the two things.
That's good stuff. You know.
Yeah, and that just came off the top of my head. Yeah.
Well, all this did. I didn't give you these questions ahead of time, so it all did. That's really good. Now, the last thing I wanted to ask you and understand was, all right, so you're a young man, you're in England, you're working as a chef in Michelin-star rated restaurants. How'd you go from there to leadership in helping other people in that way?
Oh, well, if I'll say this as quickly as I possibly can without being too long-winded. There's a speech that Steve Jobs did, which was the commencement speech for Stanford University. If you ever want to be inspired, watch it. I think it's had many, many millions of views. Have you seen it yourself?
I've seen it.
Yeah. And I've seen it a number of times. And in short, one of the points he made was any experience that you have can add value to you as you go through life. And one of the examples he made was he did calligraphy when he dropped out of university. And when Apple first did its software, they did fonts in different sizes and different sizes and italic and bold, etc., which that was inspired by his calligraphy days. And then Microsoft followed suit, and all computers have that now. And I think the point is that, interesting enough, I worked as a chef at a very high level with two very famous chefs. Now I organize events where food is quite an important part, and I'm able to make sure food is good quality because I'm able to taste and have an idea and give critical feedback and stuff. I also was an event organizer. I'm also a coach. And now I organize events for executives, and I can bring most of those things together. What I'm not particularly good at is entertainment and music. So if I did a ball, I need to hire in someone that can do that because I can't dance, sing, or I'm useless at that. But the areas of organizing, banquets, lunches, facilitation. I've been a trainer, so I know speaking and what facility. I can pull all those together, and so I'm a coach as well. So like I said, so I think that skills that you pick up over the years can be so useful to you. I mean, I worked with somebody that knew a lot about printing, and I touch business cards and stuff. And when we print our invitations or we do letterheads or whatever, anything you can learn to help you. I'm sure we're the same, right? I'm sure we're the same.
I always I tell staff that, I'm paying you to learn, actually. And these skills that you're learning that I'm paying you to understand, you're going to use those again.
But David, I'm sure you know this. You are pouring yourself into people sometimes, or I used to, and they don't want to learn some of them.
Okay, well, I have a rule with that now. I will give if I see that the ability is there and the willingness is there to multiply it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So, I don't want it to dead end with that. So maybe salesmen or sales managers that I know that, hey, this guy's going to be able to really teach this to other people. Then I'm in.
Yeah. I've made the mistake of thinking because I'm a professional coach or because I've got a skill in training and developing that I can train anybody, and I realize I can't. I made the mistake of banging my head against a wall. And I remember once somebody left our organization. I actually think I got his resignation in the end. And Tim, my son, said, "Why did you keep him so long?" Yes. And I thought, you're right.
Yeah, that's what.
I mean, the pain we all went through.
That's right.
So there you go.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me today, Victor. I really appreciate you taking your time and.
Well,
I hope we can help someone unlock some potential.
I hope so too. I hope these stories are helpful, and thank you for the opportunity.
You bet. Thank you, sir. You bet.
Cheers.
Now, if this episode sparked something in you, please subscribe to Unlock Potential with David Archibald on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave me a comment. Share your favorite takeaways and tag someone who needs to hear it, because this podcast isn't just about unlocking potential, it's about doing it together. So see you next time.